"Get out of my house," I told my own son, while my wife lay on the dining room floor holding her shoulder. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. His wife looked offended. My 7-year-old granddaughter was crying so hard she could barely breathe, and the one person who should have stood between his mother and the woman who just shoved her into a wall looked me straight in the eye and said, "Dad, it was just an accident." That was the moment I understood I didn't have a problem with my daughter-in-law anymore. I had a problem with my son. I'm Richard Donovan, 69 years old, 34 years as Chief Building Inspector for the city before I retired. My whole career was built on one rule. When something becomes dangerous, you don't wait for a second collapse. You stop it immediately. I never imagined the building I'd someday have to condemn would be my own family. That evening was supposed to celebrate my wife Helen's 67th birthday, 43 years of marriage, a quiet night with the people she loved. Our son Michael arrived with his wife Vanessa and their daughter Sophie. Candles glowed. Sophie handed her grandmother a homemade card, and for a while I really believed this would just be an ordinary good memory. Looking back, that was the calm before everything broke apart. During dinner, Vanessa picked up an old serving platter beside the cake, faded glaze, a corner repaired decades earlier. Helen smiled. "My mother gave me that before she passed," she said softly. Vanessa gave a short laugh. "Honestly, Helen, some things should stay in the past. It makes the table look outdated." The room went quiet. Michael stared at his plate and said nothing, while Vanessa kept going. The decorations, the furniture. Joking, the house felt more like a museum. Helen stood to carry a dish to the kitchen, determined not to let it ruin her night. Then it happened, faster than thought. Vanessa stood at the same moment. There was a sharp bump, and Helen crashed backward into the wall. The dish shattered. Sophie screamed. I reached Helen first. She was holding her shoulder, her face frozen in shock. I turned to Michael, waiting for him to check on his mother or confront his wife. Instead, he glanced at Vanessa and said quietly, "Dad, it was probably just an accident." I looked at my son, then at the bruise already forming under Helen's sleeve. 34 years inspecting unsafe buildings taught me the greatest danger is never the first crack. It's the people who insist the crack isn't there. I pointed at the door and told them to leave. 10 minutes later, their car disappeared into the night, birthday candles still burning behind me. I walked into my office, unlocked an old filing cabinet, and pulled out a thick property folder my son hadn't thought about in 6 years. My son's silence had just triggered consequences neither of them had ever imagined. The next morning felt strangely ordinary, and somehow that made it worse. Only the bruise on Helen's shoulder reminded me anything had happened. She insisted on keeping her volunteer shift at the library. "I'm not letting one bad evening keep me inside," she said. I admired that, but I knew she wasn't going because she felt strong. She was going because she didn't want anyone to worry. Once she left, I opened that filing cabinet and found a worn brass key tagged with one address. Michael's house, everyone called it, though legally it never was. 6 years earlier, when the bank turned down Michael and Vanessa's mortgage, I could have simply written a check. But I believe gifts solve today's problem, while creating tomorrow's entitlement. Instead, I bought the house myself and had my attorney Evelyn Brooks draft a lease-to-own agreement. Michael would build stability and earn ownership, not inherit it through convenience. I opened the folder and found what I was looking for: Section 8. The family safety provision. I'd insisted on it even when Evelyn questioned whether it was necessary. It stated that if the occupants created a credible threat to the safety of an immediate family member, I could terminate the agreement with written notice. At the time, it felt like nothing more than careful planning. Now those few paragraphs carried an entirely different weight. I called Evelyn. I described what happened without emotion, just facts. Vanessa shoved Helen. Helen hit the wall. Michael refused to acknowledge it. Evelyn read Section 8 back to herself. The language is enforceable, she said. If you're asking whether this qualifies, yes. I looked at that brass key. For years it meant hope, a father helping his son build a future. Now it meant something else, boundaries. Prepare the termination notice, I said quietly. Monday morning, an email arrived. Termination notice ready. I read every page twice. Important decisions should never be made in anger. They should survive a second reading. This one did. Michael and Vanessa had 30 days to vacate under the family safety provision they'd signed 6 years earlier. I signed it and sent it back without a single comment. Around 11, my phone rang. Michael. Dad, what is this? No greeting, just panic. You're terminating the agreement, he said. Yes. There has to be some mistake, he said. There isn't. You're throwing us out over one family argument, he snapped. I'm acting because your mother was no longer safe in my home, I told him calmly. Vanessa didn't mean to hurt her, he said. The exact sentence I'd expected since Saturday. I'm not asking what Vanessa meant, I replied. I'm asking what happened. Then Vanessa took the phone. This is completely unreasonable, she said. You can't destroy our family's future because people got upset at dinner. Not once did she say sorry. Not once did she ask how Helen was feeling. Every sentence circled back to the house. Finally, she said, You're punishing Sophie too. The first time either of them had mentioned my granddaughter. It's about responsibility, I told her, and ended the call. That night, Helen played me a voicemail from Michael. Mum, please talk to Dad. Tell him we're sorry, we can't lose this house. No question about her shoulder. No apology to her. Only fear of losing the property. Helen stared at the dark phone screen. He never once asked if I was okay, she whispered. For the first time since Michael was born, we both understood the house had become more important to him than the woman who'd made every place he ever lived feel like home. 3 days of silence followed, which felt more unsettling than the shouting had. Experience taught me sudden silence rarely means acceptance. It usually means someone is preparing a different approach. Friday, Helen left for her library shift and hesitated at the door in a way I'd never seen. You'll be home around 4, she asked. I told her closer to 3. That hesitation stayed with me long after she drove off. At 2:18, my phone rang. Helen, whispering, not crying, not shouting. Richard, Vanessa's here. I was already grabbing my keys. I arrived to find Helen standing near the library entrance and Vanessa waiting across the sidewalk in a tailored cream suit, looking more like a businesswoman than someone who'd shoved her mother-in-law days earlier. She smiled at me, the smile of someone still convinced she could control the outcome. Everything happened so fast, she began. We were both emotional. Less than 20 seconds in and responsibility had already become shared between them. Helen said quietly, You pushed me. No, Vanessa said. We bumped into each other. Helen stepped backward, and it told me everything. She wasn't stepping away from conflict. She was stepping away from fear. I moved between them. This conversation is over. Do you have any idea what this is doing to Michael? Vanessa demanded, still not asking how Helen's shoulder was healing. You could fix all of this today. Just withdraw the notice. The only person who could have prevented that notice, I told her, is the one who shoved my wife. Her smile vanished completely. You're going to regret turning your own son against you, she said coldly. No, he'll regret not doing it sooner, a voice answered from behind us. A woman in her 60s walked toward us, and Vanessa's confidence disappeared, replaced by something like fear. The woman stopped beside me. You've been rewriting the truth your entire life, she said quietly. It's time someone stopped believing you. Vanessa said nothing, turned and drove away. The woman extended her hand. Patricia Cole, she said, I'm Vanessa's sister, and I think you deserve to know who she's really been for 20 years. We sat in a coffee shop 15 minutes later. I've wanted to make this call for years, Patricia said. She slid an envelope across the table, police incident reports, court filings, old photographs, a shattered dining table, bruises on a man's forearm. Her former fiancé, she said, never filed charges he believed she'd change. Another report, 3 years later, different boyfriend, same pattern, same apology. Did Michael know any of this? I asked. Not every detail, Patricia said, but enough. He told me she had a difficult personality. Richard, she said, a difficult personality doesn't leave people afraid to disagree with you. Then she leaned closer. There's something else. Michael has a habit. Whenever Vanessa starts getting angry, he doesn't calm the situation. He quietly steps back and lets someone else absorb it. I've watched it happen at birthdays, holidays, even our father's funeral. Suddenly every family memory I'd never questioned rearranged itself, Michael disappearing into silence while arguments spread around him, Helen comforting everyone else after Vanessa exploded. Patricia pulled out printed emails, messages Michael had sent Vanessa over the years, mostly about money, refinancing, gaining ownership of the house, each one written within days of a major family conflict. Whenever life became unstable, Patricia said, Michael started talking about the property. It wasn't proof he'd planned anything. It proved something almost worse. Every crisis became an opportunity. Back home, I unlocked that metal box again. For 6 years, I believed that key represented my son's future. Now I understood it represented something else. Responsibility had been placed in Michael's hands long ago, and again he'd chosen the easier path instead. Tuesday, an attorney's letter arrived. Michael had hired counsel to challenge the termination, calling it an unfortunate family disagreement, not a legitimate safety concern, demanding the notice be withdrawn. Evelyn read it and shook her head. They're hoping emotion outweighs the contract, she said. It won't. Helen's medical record, the photographs, the confrontation at the library, they all strengthen your position. That afternoon, Michael showed up at my garage, exhausted, shirt wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. Can we talk? He asked. Vanessa's moving into an apartment, he said. I filed for divorce yesterday. Why now? I asked. Because I finally stopped believing the next apology would be different, he said. I should have left a long time ago. he whispered. Yes, I answered. Then he looked at me. Dad, if the divorce is happening, maybe we can find another solution with the house. Everything made sense again, the lawsuit, the calls, the library. Even now, after admitting his marriage failed, it circled back to the property. Do you know what hurts the most? I asked him. It isn't what Vanessa did. It's that every road you take eventually leads back to this house. He didn't deny it because he couldn't. I'm trying to protect Sophie, he said. Then protect her, I said. But don't confuse protecting your daughter with keeping a house that was never yours. The agreement stands, Michael. He nodded slowly, not agreeing, just finally understanding I wasn't changing my mind, and walked down the driveway. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 3 mornings later, Helen pulled back the curtain and frowned. A dark blue SUV sat across the street, engine off, no one getting out. It appeared several more times over the next few days, never coming close, always positioned to watch our porch. Helen stopped sitting outside in the evenings. This had stopped being about property. Fear had followed us home. Saturday, at a small cafe, Helen's face changed mid-meal. Vanessa was walking toward us in oversized sunglasses, like this was a chance encounter. It wasn't. Michael filed for divorce yesterday, she said to Helen. This is exactly what you wanted, isn't it? Helen shook her head. I never wanted your marriage to end. You took everything from me, Vanessa said. First the house, now my family. No one took those things from you, Helen answered quietly. Still nothing about the shove, still no apology, every road leading back to the house. People who destroy other families eventually lose something too, Vanessa whispered, leaning toward Helen. Helen stepped back instinctively. I took out my phone. I'm calling the police. Uncertainty crossed Vanessa's face when she noticed customers already recording on their phones. She turned and drove away without another word. Driving home, Helen admitted quietly, I don't think she came to talk. She came to see if she could still make you afraid, I said. It worked, Helen whispered, and hearing that hurt more than anything. I called Evelyn that evening. We're done treating this as a family disagreement, she said. We're filing for a restraining order. Between the surveillance, the library confrontation, and now this, we have a clear pattern. Move-out day arrived on a grey, rainy Tuesday. It's finished, Evelyn said. Michael signed the final papers this morning. I expected relief. Instead, all I felt was exhaustion. There was nothing to celebrate. A family had fallen apart. Patricia called later. They're staying at a motel, she said. Michael has Sophie this week. No father dreams of hearing his son and granddaughter are living out of a motel room. 2 weeks passed with almost no contact. Then, one evening, the phone rang. Michael, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. I used to think losing the house was the worst thing that could happen, he said. I was wrong. Sophie asked me yesterday why we're living in one room, he said. She wanted to know when we'd go home. I didn't know what to tell her. I told her the truth, he said. Grown-ups sometimes make choices they can't undo. Then, Dad, I keep replaying that night. Not just what Vanessa did, what I did. Mum was standing there holding her shoulder, and I was more worried about keeping the peace than protecting her. There were no excuses in his voice this time, no mention of Vanessa, no mention of the house, just responsibility. I spent years believing staying quiet made me the reasonable one, he said. Now I realize it only made me part of the problem. We talked for almost half an hour about Sophie, about the father he wanted to become, and for the first time, it wasn't about lawyers or property at all. 3 weeks after Michael moved out, Evelyn called with news. The buyer signed this morning, she said. The house is officially under contract. I turned that worn brass key between my fingers one last time. Evidence, conflict, responsibility, and finally just a key again. Some places carry too much history to become someone else's future, I told her. What would you like to do with the proceeds? She asked, once the sale closed. I want every dollar donated, I said. All of it? She asked, surprised. Every dollar. I slid a sheet across the desk with one name on it. Safe Harbor Women's Shelter, where Helen had volunteered for years, helping women escape dangerous homes. 2 days later, Helen and I visited the shelter together. The director read the donation amount twice. Mr. Donovan, are you certain? She asked. Completely, I said. This money will buy something more than beds or counseling, she said. It will buy time. Time for people to choose safety before fear convinces them to stay. Walking back to the car, Helen slipped her hand into mine. This feels right, she whispered. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again. Peace. That evening, Michael called. Patricia told me what you did, he said. You gave it all away. A few months ago, I would have thought you were taking something from me, he admitted. Now I think you were trying to make sure none of us kept living under the weight of that house. I'm not calling to ask for anything, he said. I just wanted you to hear it from me. You made the harder choice because I wouldn't. Neither of us mentioned the house once during that entire call. For the first time since Helen's birthday, we spoke as father and son instead of two men on opposite sides of a contract. 18 months have passed since that birthday dinner. These days, our evenings look ordinary again, 2 cups of coffee on the wooden porch swing, watching the neighborhood settle into quiet. That swing used to remind us of everything we'd lost. Now it reminds us that peace isn't something you find. It's something you protect. Helen no longer checks the front window before leaving the house. She laughs more. She's back at the shelter every week, and we've been told the donation has already helped dozens of women and children leave dangerous homes without fear of where they'd sleep that night. Michael's divorce finalized months after we sold the house. Not easy, not clean, but necessary. He rented a modest townhouse close enough that Sophie could stay with him every other week. The first time we visited, the furniture didn't match. Half the walls were bare, but it was calm. Sophie laughed freely. No tension waiting beneath polite conversation. Daddy smiles more now, she whispered to me, hugging me tight before we left. Children notice changes adults often miss. At the driveway, Michael handed me a folded letter. No legal document, no request, just words. I didn't think I could say this out loud, he said. I read it at home. No excuses, no blame toward Vanessa, no complaints about the house, just the truth that the hardest part of the past year wasn't rebuilding his finances. It was accepting that every time his mother needed him, he'd chosen silence because silence felt easier than courage. At the bottom, he'd written one line, I'll never forget. You didn't choose a house over me. You chose Mum's safety over my excuses. People often ask if I regret the decision I made that night. I never hesitate to answer. I regret that Helen was hurt. I regret that my son waited so long to face the truth. I regret that Sophie had to watch adults make painful mistakes. But I do not regret choosing my wife. Love without boundaries eventually becomes permission. Forgiveness without accountability eventually becomes surrender. 34 years inspecting buildings taught me the same lesson every time. Small cracks, ignored today, become catastrophic failures tomorrow, and families are no different. Sometimes protecting the people you love means making the decision they will hate you for, at least until they finally understand why you made it. If you were in my place that night, would you have done the same thing or handled it differently? Tell me honestly in the comments below. And if this story reminded you why boundaries matter, even inside your own family, hit subscribe to Aftermath Tales, because these are the stories that show what real love actually protects.